Alright, in this video I'm going to show how to fix your Shpero R2-D2. There's no sort of fail-safes in these gears, so if too much pressure gets applied on the legs or the middle leg, one of these guide pins in here is going to snap off, and then you're done for, because it affects the entire rest of the mechanism. This little clip on this gearbox isn't too bad, but the ones that hold the head in place are absolutely ridiculous. You pretty much have to cut them off in order to work on it. Okay, so here is what the gearbox looks like all together. This screw needs to come off before you can pull the gears out. All right, so that screw is off, and now the whole thing is going to come out. But the problem with this particular gearbox is right here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a crack, and right in this spot there should be a pin, kind of like this one here, that goes through and slides into the track, and that's what keeps everything in alignment. Just even getting R2 apart in order to fix this is a real chore, so be forewarned. Here's that gear part. As you can see, it's cracked. You can't glue this. This is nylon, and there is practically nothing that works on this stuff. So it's better to plastic weld it. And that's actually just pretty simple. All you do is you take a hot soldering iron and you remelt the seam. It's really very effective. It creates a pretty nice bond. And I'm just going to go through and touch this crack a number of places. And it should hold together quite nicely. So now all I'm going to do is find something to replace this pin. I found a little tiny screw to put in there. It's the kind of screw that you might find on a pair of sunglasses or glasses. I've also got this pipette, and if I just clip this off, it's already got a hole in it. I can just widen it out a little bit and screw it right on there, and it should hold pretty well. That post is about 2.5 millimeters wide. Okay, so for the proper alignment of this thing, you've got the gray bars facing towards you. This slides over the pin like so. This wheel, this next wheel, for proper alignment, this pin needs to be at the beginning of its track, like so, so that the angle is facing towards you. Next comes the part that I fixed. That actually does slide, slides over this metal rod, but make sure that the slot is facing towards you, and it slides over the axle on that wheel. Okay, then next comes this part. It doesn't actually fit on precisely anywhere. It just needs to make sure that it goes over the middle of that axle there. Then the last wheel, this one slides on, and it can only slide on one way. It's an angled peg there. So now that you've got that alignment, this peg here needs to slide in towards the very beginning of its course in that inner wheel. So it'll be towards the inside so that this bracket faces up, because that's going to fit into the housing. And then this last one is going to also be like on the other side. It's going to be towards the end of its course there so that it faces up like that. Because if you don't have all of those pins exactly right, you'll never get it. The trick is that this needs to fit back in to this spot here. There's just a little tiny groove that it sits into so that that screw with the flat base can go in there. Of course, make sure that you've got the gray retaining bracket in there. I'll put that in a second. The entire assembly is covered in grease, and there's 4 different pins all trying to be in the right spot. You've got to have everything aligned just right. Don't forget these things. The small hole goes on the right, the larger hole goes on the left. They have to be facing straight down. Now, in theory, if I can just hold everything in place, you need almost another set of hands for this. It should drop in there. Make sure that these 2 brackets fit into this slot and this slot here. Finally had my eureka moment, I think, here. That was a little tricky to get in. I actually, by pulling out the leg and twisting it and pushing it down, I was able to get that post to align and get into that hole. This is how it works. The servo rotates this, retracts the leg, locks the legs firmly in an upright place. The other way around, it drops it. There's of course the 2 housing parts just clip together. There are 3 screws that hold everything into place, and those are here, here, and here. I went ahead and left off the little glider part. It'll be really easy to attach later. Alright, so the next thing I need to do is put this assembly that holds R2's dome back on. It really only goes on one way, as you can see, this how the screws align. You can actually strip out a plastic hole. One way to prevent doing that is to turn it counterclockwise until you feel a little tiny hop. And that's where the thread is aligned, and then you can screw it in and you don't have to worry about stripping it out. Alright, so the next step is to reattach the servo assembly to the gear housing. This is what runs the whole works. Make sure that this axle aligns correctly with the hole in the gearbox. It's a trapezoidal shape, so it has to be exactly right. You can manipulate this a little bit, of course. Just rotate it left or right if you need to get it correct. There's another snap here, exactly in place. You don't want to force that. Snaps right on there. There's 2 more screws. The next step is to attach the speaker box. And that just slides on like so. There's 2 more screws. The wire is clipped in. After you've got the sort of the speaker attached, and the wire is to put the front back on. These 2 posts slide through the body. I just now need to take these 2 screws, and there are 2 holes through the back here where they will attach. Have to move the dome assembly again. All right, so before attaching the dome, you should do a couple things, like reattach these wiring clips. They're hard to get at with the dome on there. And this is the part that is probably the most frustrating on this entire thing. There are these 3 snaps that are almost impossible to remove from this gearbox assembly without breaking. In fact, in the one other video I've seen where they talk about the different parts of R2, they actually use a Dremel to grind these out. I cut them down with an X-Acto knife. And there's only one way of aligning it. There's 2 closer snaps and then a third one that forms a triangular pattern. But now I suspect that his head will come off a lot more easily. But I don't know, it's on there. So I came up with a solution. There actually are 3 screws that attach this silver bracket. You can see there's these little recesses where the screws are. There's 3 of them. And once you unscrew those, the whole thing comes off. So all I did was make 2 recesses to access those screws, because the third one's already, you can already access from underneath. So now I can take the dome on and off. Now, in order to do that, you do have to unplug one more thing. This wiring harness comes up through this hole here. In reattaching it, there's 2 little plastic pins, and you just rotate this, boom, until they click into place. And then just plug this back in. You just have to notice that the main LED board is where all of R2's lights in the front are, and there's this one on the side here, and then the big long one on that side. I've got R2's dome reattached using the screws, which I was able to access now from the underside. So the next step is the legs. We'll have to plug the legs back in. Most people probably know that the way you can tell that is R2's wires here, these cables face to the front. Now that the legs are plugged back in, also cannot forget R2's battery, which is a 1400 milliamp hour, 3.75 or 3.7 volt lithium polymer battery. And that just slides right in here like so. Push in and down to attach that. So to reattach the back, you have to have these 2 blue decorative parts in place. There it goes. You have to put the back panel on before you can reattach the legs. You have to be really careful because, of course, the wires are the only thing that's sort of holding it at this point. But they need to be able to hang loose so that you can put this bottom plate on. And it only goes on one way. Once that's all put together, then you can just slide the legs. There's 3 pegs that they sit on both sides. 3 screws. And it's worth noting that these screws actually are unique. The one in the center is a coarser thread than the other 3. There's 2 more screws here and here that are covered by these panels. And that's it. That's all that it really takes to get it back together.